What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Recover Out Loud, episode number 66. Today, we have an awesome guest from Riverside, California, Jennifer Henry. How you doing, Jennifer?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's like super hot. Took a walk today down to the local cemetery. I mean, it's kind of weird, right? But took a walk around, got to walk around. It's like a national cemetery too, and I didn't realize how big it was. And I got there and I was like, "Fuck, this is huge."
So what was it like when you got there? Like what's the vibe there? Like why is it such a, like what's the cemetery?
So it is the Antietam National Cemetery. It is where all veterans, for the most part, from this area, to include Civil War veterans, are buried there, and they have them separated by state, which is super cool. So like they
That
have
is cool.
Maryland separated in aisles. They have Iowa separated in aisles. Like it's just insane. And in the middle, there's this massive statue of a Civil War Union soldier. Just it has to be almost 100 foot high. Yeah, it is a sight to behold. It is crazy.
What an experience.
Right,
And it's right
right.
down the street. You were able to walk to it? Is that what you said?
Yeah. It was like a 10-minute walk there.
That's cool.
Yeah, I love history, and that's a part of history.
I was going to say there's so much history in a place like that. So you just must have had a field day.
Yeah, I mean, I was running on TikTok because like I have this thing on TikTok where I go, do cemetery walks sometimes and show people's death dates because I think it's important.
Yeah.
Talk about them, and I found some that predate America being founded as a country, and I find that really, yeah, like
Yeah.
we're talking 1750s. Insane, absolutely insane. And
Very
so
cool.
yeah, so I find that stuff intriguing, and I went on that walk today, and I was like, well, it's the National Cemetery, Civil War soldiers. I stepped through the cemetery gates. It was huge, and I was just like, this is overwhelming. I'm gonna hit a section up, and then I'm gonna come back maybe in a few days and do more.
It's so crazy stepping into something like that and just really feeling the kind of God impact and influence and just the dynamic
Yeah.
of what has been sacrificed for us to be able to sit here and even be on this show together. You know what I mean? And you
Mhm.
really, when you think about the levity of that, it's just huge.
Yeah, and like you're absolutely right. And I was walking through, and I was looking at the gravestones, and I was reading off what wars that the men and women have been a part of, and there were guys and gals that were in the 82nd Airborne Division, which I was in the 82nd Airborne Division during World War II, and I was like, that is amazing to see part of my lineage like right in front of me. It's pretty
How
cool.
intense. How awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I know that's probably just one piece of what we'll be diving into, but that's huge. We have a national cemetery here too, March Air Force Base down here in Southern California, and it was an active air base for years. It's one of the oldest air bases, and they've actually reinstated it as a military base. And so I just
Oh,
find it so we get to witness some of the planes coming in and going and just all the commotion and stuff, and it's really um, I'm sorry, there's March Air Force, right? And then they have the National Cemetery that kind of goes with it. And it's on Van Buren here in Riverside. And it's so impactful. Like I said, when I go and I visit, I have family members there that have served, and I go and I visit them and stuff. But just the feeling that you get, and I don't know, it overwhelms me with gratitude, right? Like
yeah,
it's a weird feeling of gratitude of like, I know that I could have been in that ground, like not necessarily that cemetery because I haven't
yeah,
served, but I know how close I came to not being on this side of the dirt. And it's just that much more impactful when you go and you see all of the people that have sacrificed their life so that I could actually have a chance at this life. And so, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, before we like dive into anything, this is not about me. It's about you, Jen. Would you like to give a formal introduction of yourself?
Sure. I feel like it changes every time I say this, but I am Jen Henry. I was born and raised in Southern California on a horse ranch with over 13 horses that I had the opportunity to take care of and to help build my character. However, that was the gist of it. That was my life. I had no other siblings. I had no close friends. There was no not a lot of engagement as far as play and fun and that kind of thing. It was more like just in my own little world. And so growing up, I was super codependent. I just wanted to be accepted, right? Because I was this only child and I just wanted your acceptance. I wanted you to include me and like me. And so very quickly I learned that if I just liked what you liked and I said yes to the things that you wanted to do and I became who you wanted me to be, that I was automatically accepted. And so that was kind of the key of like kind of what went wrong in my life and where it took an ugly turn because I was totally blessed. I had everything handed to me. I was a spoiled brat, to be honest with you. And I was taught how to love by being given things and people doing things for me, my parents being amazing that they tried to do everything for me and provide everything for me. But I didn't appreciate it because when you're just handed everything and everything is done for you, you don't learn how to want. You don't learn how to set goals. You don't learn how to aspire to be or do anything. And I touch on that because it's such an epidemic right now, right? With our kids and these parents that are wanting to coddle and do for and everything like that. And so if you're listening and you're doing that, knock it the freak off because you're ruining your child. But anyway, so that's kind of what happened, and so, I go into puberty and stuff and I'm moving into high school or junior high actually. And I just wanted to be accepted. And I started hanging out with kids that they were really good at disconnecting. They were really good at numbing and escaping and having fun. And that was something that I was really drawn to because I cared so much. I was so empathetic and so sensitive energetically to everyone else. And if they were sad, I was sad. If they were happy, I was happy. And I just kind of fell into that. And it was a lot for me. And I was a lot. I was undiagnosed ADHD and then later on, bipolar. And those insecurities, that imbalance, that disconnection, only helped those imbalances made me want to disconnect. And so I looked for anything that I could to disconnect. And so whether that was being whoever you wanted me to be, whether that was drugs, whether that was, sex, no matter what that was, it was something that called to me because I wanted to be numb. I didn't want to feel so much. And at a very early age, I started using methamphetamine. I started with I started with weed, and everyone says it's a gateway drug, but I think disconnection is the gateway drug, right? It started with weed, that kind of helped, but then I found cocaine, that helped even more. Then I found acid and ecstasy. That was like, okay, let's do this. And then by the time I was 16, I was trying to get some cocaine for a party and they were like, oh, why don't you just do speed? And I was like, oh, I'll never touch that because it's, I've heard the horror stories and they're like, oh, they just didn't know how to handle it. It's just like Coke. It just lasts longer. And I'm here to tell you that is not the truth. Absolutely not. Because we call it speed shit and everything that shit touches turns to shit. And that was the experience that I got to have. And so I, lost my life like in so many ways other than the physical being. And even then really like my spirit was dead. Like I had nothing left. And I ended up getting arrested when I was 18 and it saved my life. Yeah. And so for the next 4 years, I really dug into the anonymous programs. I had 4 years clean and sober off of every mind altering substance possible. And I got into a really unhealthy relationship. Was really, again, really not recovering from my codependency. Really, instead, I was just enabling it more and feeding it more because I needed to be of service. I needed to be an example of. I needed to, I couldn't trust my own instincts. I had to call someone to make sure that what I was doing was right. And like, I had to follow, it was just, I had to copy these things and recite these things that made absolutely no sense until it finally sunk in. But even then I was still parroting. And it's like, here I am again, the same way it was in school, the same way it was with friends, the same way it was with everything that's been up till now. And it was like, they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and I just didn't fit in this box they were trying to put me in. And while I didn't recognize at the time because my codependency was an all-time high, and my fiance at the time ended up relapsing on alcohol because he was also a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, unfortunately, I had put all of my worth into him and not enough into myself. And so when he fell apart, long story short, so did I. And sorry about that. And when it came down to it, his relapse just simply triggered my inability to stay connected without right. And I realized at that time that I couldn't do it by myself. And I went back out. I went right back to slamming meth. I went right back to the old neighborhood. I went right back. Only this time I wasn't going to be the victim. I had learned my lesson. And so this time I came out guns blazing, and I was not a good influence at all. We'll just say that. And I mean, I was running full bore ahead. I was robbing people. I was like, it was a really bad, ugly situation. And it wasn't me. It was the disconnection, right? I was completely disconnected from even reality, let alone myself. And fast forward, I ended up going to prison, coming out worse than I went in, being out for 67 days, getting rearrested and held on a parole hold. So there was no bailing out this time, right? I'd bailed out 2 times. So I was on 2 bail holds. It was a mess, right? And no more bailing out, no pass and go, no collecting $200. Like, you are going straight. Like, that's what's happening. And so I had the opportunity at that moment to really step back and look at, like, is this really, obviously the prison didn't work. Like, I have to fight for something different. And so during I didn't go to trial, but during my proceedings, during my arguments, I begged. I told him, look, I just got out. Like, I obviously don't know how to do life. Like, I need to learn how to cope. I need to learn how to be okay in my own skin. I need to learn how to process life and like do this thing called life. I need to know how to feel. Like, I don't know any of this stuff. And thankfully, my public defender fought for me, which is very rare, and ended up getting me a 6-month mandatory program, which I was so grateful for upon my release. So I ended up doing 17 months in prison, 17 and a half months in prison, and then going straight to a residential treatment program for women who are reintegrating. And, I'm there and they're trying to teach me all this cognitive and behavioral therapy and dialectical therapy. And they're trying to ask me how I'm feeling. And I'm like, you realize I've been numb for the last 20 years, right? Like, we're getting that. Like, you understand that? Like, I'm at the time on so many psych meds that even if I wanted to feel, I couldn't.
It's still allowing you to disconnect.
Oh, it is still disconnecting me. It is still not giving me a baseline. Like, I don't know where I knew it's instinctively, like, when I got out of prison this last time, it was 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. And when I got out of prison this last time, I just knew that, like, I had to start being the one asking myself questions. I had to start getting curious. I had to start getting connected. And so I knew I couldn't do that and get the answers that I needed from myself if I was numbing all the different parts of myself that were too much or too scared or too whatever, right? That everyone's been trying to tell me I was all this time. And instead of asking everybody else's opinion, I started asking my own. And so I went to the doctor. I talked to him about coming off my meds. He wasn't thrilled about it. It was actually a stipulation of my parole that I be on these meds because they said that I was a risk to myself and others. Wow. So while at the time I hated it, I appreciated that they were trying to step in and like help someone who couldn't help themselves. But I knew that that wasn't the answer. And I knew I had to do what I had to do. While I was in program and I was going through these withdrawals, I was coming out of my skin, obviously, right? At the time, they still allowed benzodiazepines and all that into the psych treatments in rehab. And I was coming off of benzodiazepines and a bunch of other antipsychotics and mood stabilizers and 7 different psych meds. Mm. And when, I'm in this, we'd get done programming. We program in group from like 9 to 5 with a couple breaks. At the end of the day, everyone's burnt out. They just want to do what they want to do. They want to play their cards, make their phone calls, watch their shows, read their books. And there was this old treadmill that I saw in the rec room, and it's not a big room and it's already loud as it is. And so I get up. I don't know what I'm thinking. I've never really been into the gym or working out. I was kind of athletic, but just for fun. Right. And I get on this treadmill because I'm like, I got to move. If I don't get on that treadmill, I'm going to run out the door. And I'm still a ward of the state. Can't run out the door. I'll go back to prison. So I'm getting on this stupid treadmill. And I got on it and I started moving my body. And I started feeling this release of this energy that had been pent up for so long. God knows how long. Right. Yeah. And it became my release. And I had to fight literally to stay on that treadmill, because if you've ever heard an old treadmill or smelled one, the smell of burning rubber almost smells like urine, right? And then cat urine. It's what it smelled like, is cat pee. So not only is it smelling like cat pee now in this room, but like the screech of like the of the loud ass treadmill, if you've ever heard one, you guys know it's unmistakable. And I got on that treadmill every day after programming, no matter what. I didn't care who you were, what was going on, what you had, phone call you had to make, like make it after my freaking treadmill run then, right? Make it after my cardio then, because I'm doing this. And, that thankfully, I started asking questions and getting curious on, they're like, oh, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I'm like, bitch, I don't know what I want for lunch. Are you serious? Yeah. Like, I can't with you right now. And at the time we didn't have those sayings, but that's what it is now, right? I can't with you right now because like, So I got to get curious, and like these people were saying things like, I want to reunite with my family. That wasn't what I wanted. Even though I did, and that was great, like that wasn't the goal. The goal was to like reunite with myself, right? The goal was to get clear on what I wanted. The goal was to like learn how to be okay in my own skin. The goal was to learn how to identify my feelings. The goal was to identify what success looked like to me. Like those were my goals. I wasn't ready to like identify what success was yet. My perspective was so skewed by the experiences that I had had up to that point. I would have done myself the worst disservice if I set my goal on owning my own home.
Yeah.
At that point in my life, I couldn't even believe that I could at that point in my life. So it wouldn't even have been in my purview. And so it was really about starting to take these little incremental baby steps and really starting to get curious without judgment. Like, stop telling yourself you're a piece of shit. Stop telling yourself you're not capable. Like, what if you were? Like, then what? What would that look like? You know? And really, so I started to get on this journey of curiosity. I started to get on this journey of like introspection and like without judgment. And it really has led down this amazing, beautiful path of what I now call lifestyle recovery. Because we always think of recovery like drugs and alcohol, but it's like the drugs and alcohol were the answer. They were the cure. They were the solution. The problem was me, my lifestyle, my choices, my inability to connect to what I believe to be true about this world and how I identify in it. Yeah. What do I believe is true? Because what I believe is true, I'm going to look for evidence of. And I can absolutely find tons of evidence about the fact that our medical system does not give two shits about us, about the fact that the world is collaborating against us, about the fact that it has nothing to do with the presidents. It's about local stuff, right? Like all of these things, but like I can make it about the presidents. I can make it about the world. Like I can make it about all this outside stuff. But then I'm going to find evidence of why I shouldn't do whatever follows that, right? Instead, if I look for evidence around, the fact that I am absolutely capable of anything I set my mind to, what do I want? I'm absolutely capable of having the life of my dreams. What does that look like? I'm absolutely capable of setting solid boundaries and saying yes to what works for me and no to what doesn't without feeling guilty, because I know my come from and I know who I am and I know my intentions and I'm familiar with that. And so coming from a place of believing that to be true, I can start to identify in the world as a leader, as a thought leader, as a coach, as a positive example, as someone that can hold space for others to do the same thing, right? And I can start creating that experience instead. Absolutely. And so that's what I do now. So really long-winded way of saying I'm a lifestyle recovery coach. That is what lifestyle recovery is about. It's about healing the perfectionism, the people-pleasing, the procrastination, the self-doubt, the lack of self-worth, the inability to connect, those things. That's lifestyle recovery.
Absolutely. You hit on something earlier about being empathetic toward other people when they were feeling a certain way. You felt a certain way. I've been that way up until I guess within the last year, right? It is draining as fuck. When you go from I'm so sad to I'm so happy back to I'm so sad because that's what everybody around you is doing. How was it for you?
That's exactly right. And so when I talk about boundaries, it's easy. It's not easy. Let me tell you, if I wouldn't make the money I make, if it was easy for all my clients just to say no to what wasn't working. Right. But it's like when we start to recognize even deeper on a energetic level, right? What are our energetic boundaries? Like, who am I allowing in? Like, what energy am I allowing in? And this comes down to the shows that you watch, the podcasts you listen to, the friends you let call and complain to you nonstop without any solution, just constantly digging into the problem. Like that energy, like that's the stuck mindset, right? Like I just can't with it anymore. And I had to recognize that was literally sucking the life out of me because all of a sudden I'm in their belief system. Right. And as a coach, right, what I do is hold space for people to step into what they want to be experiencing instead. And that requires me to hold space for what they're actually experiencing, which sucks the life out of me. Right. It absolutely does, because I don't want to hold space for what they're experiencing really, but I have to in order to give them a stepping off point. Right. And like one of the hardest things I think for me is not allowing myself to fall into their belief system, but simply hold space for it over here in this container just for them, where I can hold that space, but it's not mine. Yeah. And so recognizing what is and isn't mine energetically is what helps us to align, I think, with our vibe, right? There was a IG reel I saw, and I just love this. I don't know if you'll be able to find this or pull it up or link it, but it was about this gentleman, and I'm guessing he's a scientist of some sort, and he's got two tuning forks next to each other with a ping pong ball next to the second one. And he hits the one tuning fork, but it's on a different hertz level than the second, and it does nothing to the ping pong ball. He hits the second that are both the same hertz. Not only does it activate the second tuning fork, but it makes the ball bounce off of it.
Wow.
Because when you're in, like, you can feel the vibe. And if you're going to lower down your vibe, if you're not careful, when you're around other lower vibrations, you're going to lower your vibration to fit in and match that because it's more comfortable. But if you're noticing like, yeah, I'm not really vibing with this, like I'm not really connecting with anything, you got to get out of there. You got to go or you need to be strong enough in your ability to bring up the energy level, to bring up the vibe, to be able to attract the vibe, to attract the people or the community or whatever it is that you're trying to attract, manifest, that's on your level, right? And if you're trying to up level, guess who you need to surround yourself with?
People up there.
Because you're gonna relate to, you're gonna find, as a human, as a spiritual being having a human experience, you have no choice but to relate to what's going on around you, right? To fit in. It's a natural survival technique. And so if you do that in a place where it may be uncomfortable, but you know they're pulling at you to be your best self, they're challenging you, and you're like, oh, I think I could. What if I could? Like, if you continue to surround yourself with them, of course you can. They're all doing it. Yeah. Of course you can. And that's why it's so important. Who you hang out with matters. What the energy that you consume matters.
Absolutely. You're talking about vibration and stuff like that. And I'm in a Dave Ramsey like financial class right now. I trying to change the way that I work my finances and stuff. And yesterday somebody brought up and said, oh, Dave Ramsey only says this because it's a millionaire's mindset. We can't achieve that. And I was like, well, he's successful, and how many other people have gone to his class are successful. So naturally, this program has to work, right? Like, and yes, it might be a quote unquote millionaire mindset, but it's a successful mindset. Has worked for how many people? Right?
Why wouldn't you want to envelop a millionaire mindset? Like,
right.
You don't have to be a millionaire to have a millionaire mindset. In fact, if you don't have that millionaire mindset, you're never going to be a millionaire. And I love that you said, well, they were like, oh, well, that's not going to work because that's them. That's their belief system. And so those are the results they're going to get because that's the evidence they're going to look for. So it just reinstated, right? It just backed up what I was saying earlier, because it's like, you, however, are like, oh, this could totally work for me. So what are you going to do? You're going to see all the evidence, right? Your perception is going to be around all the evidence that says, oh yeah, look at all these people. Like they did it. Like if I just do this next indicated step, according to him, I could have this. So what are you going to actually do? You're going to implement that. And you're going to have 80% more chance of having having it be effective for you versus someone who has zero chance because they don't even believe it's possible for themselves. Like the first step to anything is believing it's possible for yourself, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So stepping a little bit later on in your life, and you indicated that, you got to this point where you said, I have to change. What was that moment like for you? Was it in jail? Was it when you were talking to your defense attorney? What did it look like for you?
Oh, okay. So I just finished doing all the edits on my book. I just sent back my final manuscript to the publisher. But this is a piece from that. And it's a story that I really hesitated to share openly because it's pretty raw, but I feel like this is a safe space for that. And so I will absolutely, for me, it's happened multiple times, right? Like it isn't just one thing, but the first time I ever remember actually realizing like, what the fuck, Jen? Like what the hell is happening right now? Like, whoa. It was the first time I'd ever dissociated and actually saw myself from an outside perspective. And now I do this on a regular. Now I do it as a practice, right? Stepping outside of myself to have that conversation with myself or any other parts of me that need to show up for the conversation. But that's a whole nother thing. It was, oh God. Okay. So when I got locked up this last time, I was definitely still in the game heavily. I had my rig being my needle. For those of you that don't know, my needle, my point on me. And I had about an 8 ball of dope of speed on me. And so while the cops were busy raiding the hotel room and talking to everybody else that was involved in the scene, I carefully, tucked my stuff away in my purse. If you're thinking how tampon, right? Like I put my stuff away to take with me into jail. because I knew the game now. And I knew I needed to get myself set up when I got there because I'd have nothing except for a toothbrush, and that's pretty much it. And a little comb that doesn't go through my hair. And so I went in fully prepared, met my bunkie. She was this 6'2", like probably close to 300-pound stud broad, who knew everyone there already because she'd been there fighting her case for quite a while. And so luckily for me, she knew enough people for me to be able to hustle out half of what I had. And then she and I shared the rest over the next, we'll say, few days. I'm sure it was, I honestly couldn't tell you how long it was.
Yeah.
But then it ran out.
Yeah.
And she had already been sober for a long time. So she was just on a little run. And so she was still kind of like cool. I wasn't. I'd been on a run for a good year at this point, you know, or like, you know, on and off, because I was still using when I was in prison. I never stopped. And that was a huge part of it. And so I'll never forget it. So I wake up. Okay. So she and I get into it, right? To start this off, like she and I, like I was burning out. When I was burning out, I was not the most pleasant person to be around because all the ugly stuff starts to come to the surface. And like all of a sudden, like I hate myself and I hate you and I hate the world around me and I'm mad I'm alive. And so I take it out on everybody, including myself. And so I went off on her about something. And I went after her and she just picked me up and threw me across the cell like I was nothing, because I was like maybe 100 pounds soaking wet, and threw a Bible at me and was like, "You need God, bitch." And it's not the most spiritual introduction to the word of God that I've ever, you know, heard of, but there it was, right? Like there it was. And while I'm still not a religious person, like I can't tell you this experience changed everything for me. I get up and I throw the Bible in the cubby, and I like my little 18 by 18 cubby that I have for everything I have, knock all my shit down, don't care, get up in bed, cover myself up and go to sleep. And I wake up, maybe a day or 2 days later, I'll never know. And no one's in the cell. I look out, she's at day room. And in Riverside County Jail, in the upstairs, it's 2-man cells and steel doors. And you get this little tiny window, and we call it the wicket. And so women get a wicket cover because we have women's stuff to take care of. And so I put my wicket cover up and I go to my hiding spot and I pull out my rig, and I don't have any dope left. So I pull out my rig and I threw the covers over my head and I started jacking off into my ankle. Right. And by jacking off, we mean like pushing and pulling just to pull anything that was left in the syringe out, like flushing it with our own blood to try and pull anything out. And I'm sitting there and I'm shaking, and there's blood speckling the sheets and running off my ankles, and I'm missing, and it's not okay. And I'm just fucking desperate. Like, I just need out. I just need some kind of escape. Anything but what's going on right now. Anything but this. And then like, it was like flat. Like all of a sudden I'm staring at myself, not really realizing it's myself at first. And just this overwhelming sense of like pity and sadness and like honest devastation as I'm staring at this girl who was like barely existing. I mean, I was gone. I was dead. I looked dead. I had no life left in me. I was completely unrecognizable from what I would think what I felt like I would look like, right? Like, yeah. And my heart just broke. But like for just that moment, I wasn't her. And then all of a sudden, bam, I was back in that body. And I could feel all the things again. But I realized that in that moment, I didn't. In that moment, like I just had this knowing, like this understanding, like this like full soul knowing that like I was here for a reason. I'm still here, whether you fucking like it or not, Jen. Like you're still here. There's a reason I'm keeping you around. I guarantee you, like there's more than this. Like you just have to figure it out. Yeah. And I don't know. It was this, what the hell? Like, I don't know what's happening right now. It was such a weird experience to have an out of body experience. And I look up where I had the viewpoint where I had seen myself from, and it was that stupid Bible. And so I get up and like, I'm, having this moment, and I get up and I open the book, and it says, I turn right. I don't know what I'm reading. I turn right to this. I open it up and it says, gird up the loins of your mind and be sober, and rest in assurance that your faith in God will restore you to sanity. I'm not quoting it perfectly, but that's what I remember. And I just all of a sudden broke down into this hyperventilating sob, like to where, like you might actually like pass out from lack of breathing, because I was sobbing so hysterically of like this overwhelming feeling like, oh shit, you're going to be okay. Like, you're going to be okay. Like you're going to make it. Like, I don't know what it is, but there's a reason you're still here, and we're going to figure it the fuck out. And it was a we now. It wasn't, you have to do this, or you have to follow this, or you have to, it was like, no, we're here together. Like, and slowly but surely over the last 10 years, I've introduced myself to every single one of my parts that has a say in who I'm being in this moment or in the future. Right. But at that moment, it was just me and that highest version of myself.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, that not best version of myself, like the lowest version of myself, comes in to my head all the time, interrupts my life, and is like, yeah, I don't think so. Like, don't you know who you really are? And like, they go at it like, no, yeah, I know who I am. I am, a thought leader. I am a movement leader. I am this, I am that. I am changing these people's lives. I'm contributing to these people changing their own lives. And, I'm making a difference. I'm making an impact. And I have to remind myself of that. I have to remind myself what I believe is true. But it was that catalytic moment. It was that spiritual awakening. It was that moment when I actually stepped outside of myself, stopped being in the bullshit for just a second, long enough to realize, like, this ain't it, girl. And so, the second biggest time I realized that, and it's nowhere nearly as impactful, but it did change the course of where I was going. I told you I got out, I was getting into my fitness. I thought fitness was going to be the way I was going to change the world, right? I thought that this was the key, like mental health through fitness, like that was it, right? And I really dove into that. I took a year of functional nutrition. I did my personal training. I got really into the food aspect of it. But I realized that very quickly, having gotten into competing, because I started competing during all that, because I do everything I do, I go all out, right? Yeah. And so, and I did really well at it for a while, until I started going up in the ranks, and I realized, like, in order to get to that next level, I was going to have to start juicing, and I wasn't willing to do that. And so that's a healthy boundary I set for myself. I was totally okay with it. What I wasn't okay with and wasn't prepared for was the fact that I'm over here in second place over and over and over because the girl in first place is juicing, but I'm still comparing myself to her.
Yeah.
I'm still comparing myself to all the Instagram models and filters. I'm still comparing myself to what the judges, some people who aren't on stage, who aren't living this lifestyle, who are totally their own perception of what the perfect body looks like. And I'm literally trying to live up to a guess of what they might be thinking. And it was impossible. And I realized, wait a second, hold on. People are asking me, like, oh, Jen, like, I want to look like you. I want to be healthy. And I'd be like, you got to pick. Yeah. I've been competing for 7 years now. And over the last 3 years, I haven't had a menstrual cycle. I've been dealing with my kidneys shutting down from too much protein. I'm, having urinary tract infections all the time because of my kidneys, right? Like, I'm staring in the mirror, judging myself for having 8% body fat instead of 7% body fat, not big enough legs, not big enough back, not big and tiny enough waist, not like contemplating getting my ribs removed, wearing corsets to try and shrink my waist and bring my little box waist in just a little bit so I can have more of an X frame. Like, what the hell? Like, this ain't it either. This ain't it either. And I realized I was doing the same thing with my clients. Like, I was expecting them to show up and be this way, but I wasn't in their head. Like, who are they being? Great. They were showing up for me for an hour 3 times a week. Who are they being the other 23 hours of the day? Who was I being?
Yeah.
Right. And so it really, like, all of a sudden I, realized what's happening. I stopped competing. I got kind of depressed. I realized this wasn't the overall answer. I implode, right? I put on 40 pounds. My mental health goes into all out freaking disaster zone. I'm fighting in my relationship. I'm losing clients left and right because I'm not showing up for myself in any way. I was like, that's not it either. So, it's this like pendulum situation that I've gotten to deal with my whole life. But what's beautiful is the fact that I've been paying attention now. And so as I swing one way, I can swing back just a little bit less and swing back just a little bit less. And I'm learning how to kind of navigate this manic depressive bipolar. Technically, it's schizoaffective is what I've technically been diagnosed with, right? And I navigate that without medication. I navigate that through lifestyle. I navigate that through food and exercise and meditation, but also through group communities and therapies and different things, different modalities. Like, it really does take a village. And I surround myself with people that I want to emulate, who inspire me, and surround myself with ways that fill me up. And so that way I'm always pouring from a full cup. And, and so that came from this coaching, that the work that I do now absolutely stemmed directly from letting go of personal training and competing and stepping into, like, what do I actually want to be experiencing? What do my clients want to actually be experiencing? Because it's not body dysmorphia. It's not the diet culture. It's not lack of self-worth or judgment. So what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about that internal fight that you had. And, I feel like if you don't have an internal fight, you're not normal. I have that internal fight, right? I got that part of me that I'm here now, and it's like, I'm doing great things, this, that, and third. But that sneaky little motherfucker likes to come in, and he's like, "You're a piece of shit, dude. You're a piece of shit. You remember what you did?" And it's like, well, how much have I done to work toward changing who I am? It's like that shit don't matter. There's people that still remember you for who you used to be, and so like I understand that fight, that internal fight, but it's having that ability to vanquish that voice, that changing that perspective in that voice.
Yes, I will agree with you 99%, but that 1% of me is wanting to share this piece. As I started diving deeper into parts work with myself and then more with my clients, what I've really realized is it's not about vanquishing it. It's not. It's about loving it enough for it to feel safe, to not need to keep you safe. Like, I truly believe that all of our parts and all of those voices, call it what you want to call it, they have positive intentions.
Yeah.
Right. And if we can like really get curious enough and dig deep enough to help us identify what those positive intentions are, like, I guarantee you the women that sign up with me aren't planning on going and sitting and eating a whole box of cookies checked out on Netflix. But it happens, right? And then like the guilt that comes from it. Oh my God, it's not worth it. See, you're just a failure. See all this. Or they were going to set this boundary with their kids or in their relationship or at work. And they did, but then everyone ran over it and they were just like, oh, that doesn't work. Like, oh, well, it just, you know what I mean? Like, no. And you let that happen. The positive intention behind letting that happen is wanting to be accepted, wanting to be liked. That's a positive intention. Yeah. However, intentions are different than strategies, right? You can have a positive intention all day, but if your strategy sucks, it's not going to get us very far. I have the best of intentions. I want to go to New York. Great intention. Should I hitchhike? Should I walk? Should I take the train? Should I take a bus? Should I fly? Should I hop on a friend's plane? Like, what's the best way? What's the best strategy for me to get there? Like, do I want to do a road trip so I can stop at different places along the way? Like, what strategy am I going to use? Because if I just jump into hitchhiking, it's probably not going to be the best route for me to actually make it all the way to New York, right? Not for me. And so it's really like getting clear. Okay, so you were talking specifically about, oh, you're a piece of shit. Don't you know who you are actually? Who do you think you are? And that's one, imposter syndrome, but there's a positive intention behind that, right? And it's to keep you safe. Like, that part doesn't want you to go out and explore new experiences because it's scared that you're going to just fall back into where you were.
Yeah.
Right. Oh. And so it's going to do everything it can to just keep you safe in the safe space, in the box. Right. And you just get to really connect with that part. It's like, hey, I hear you and I love you. So thank you so much for loving me that much and like being there and wanting to support me in the way that you know how. I feel like some of us need to have these conversations with our parents, right? Yeah. Like, I love you so much and appreciate you for loving me the best that you know how with what you've got. But we're going to take a different route, right? And we're going to go this way instead. And like, just really building that relationship with that, I think, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I can agree with you. I agree with you. One of my big topics is medication, right? Not necessarily MAT. That's a whole nother discussion for another time. But for me, like medication, you hit hard on it where you're on 7 different medications. I've been medicated before. And when I stopped taking those meds and I stepped back, I was like, my life was really fucking unhealthy at that time, right? Because like at one point I was taking a medication that made me feel numb, right? You could have walked up to me and said, hey, dude, I just killed your family. And be like, oh, how? Yeah. Fuck it. Right. And then I took another one that made me perpetually happy. And it's like, that you could be like, hey, I shot your family. I'd be like, oh, shit, what caliber did you use? At least they're not living this fucked up life that I'm living. Right. Yeah. And that's how it was. Like, it was just madness. What was the experience like for you?
I feel like they only ever gave me 2 options, was to medicate myself or to take their meds. Yeah. I don't feel like they ever really dove into, it's kind of like the whole medical system. We, in America, we have a medical management system, which means it's not a medical preventative system, right? We're not in a preventative system. And so, of course, they didn't use a preventative approach on me. They used a management approach. And so with that, I don't feel like they ever gave me the opportunity to think that I could do it without medication. And so I think that's the first piece, is no one ever asked me about my food that I was eating. And if they would have asked me, they would have found out I was drinking 5 or 6 Pepsis a day, eating 3 or 4 handfuls of red vines, red 40, right? I was eating bowls and bowls, little Dixie paper bowls of goldfish crackers, never ate breakfast. Lunch was like a bag of chips. Dinner was my only meal that actually made any sense. Yeah. And no one was looking at that. No one looked at the fact that I had a dad who was like super alpha, super like, get her done. You can do anything you put your mind to. Yeah. Like eat bears. And my mom, who was like this little church, like little mouse, field mouse, who like didn't want to be seen, didn't want to be heard, was scared to death of me because I was so vivacious, if you will, for lack of a better term. And she was scared to death because I had a voice and she never knew how to use hers. And so I love her to death, and she did the best she could with what she was raised with, but she was not the most like encouraging mom as far as you can do anything or be anything. It was more like, why won't you shut up? Why won't you sit still? Why can't you just be like God? Like, why can't you just be the way I want you? And so those two different dynamics, right? No one was talking to me about what that was like. No one was talking to me about the fact that they took me out of private school where I was absolutely excelling and needed the challenge because of the way my brain worked, and threw me in a public school in 7th grade with no friends, nobody. And then they were wondering why I was hanging out in the bathroom smoking weed. I was bored out of my mind because I was smarter than the teachers. The other kids in the bathroom were bored out of their minds because they had no clue what the fuck was going on. And we both wanted to disconnect, and we met on that level. And so what happened? I lowered my vibe to fit in, right? Because I just didn't want what was happening. And I didn't know how to go about creating something instead, something different, a different experience. And so, I think that, I think I squirreled off, but it's really, I squirreled off. So I have no idea where I was going with that, but there's some brain vomit for you.
Oh, I got you. It's all right. For me, when I got off meds, like I was like, oh, this is the best thing. But there's a reason behind that. My whole life I ran from those feelings, right? Whether it was in substance, whether it was with women, whether it was with, just a career that I felt I was thriving in, or the medication. I always ran away from my fucking problems and like how I really felt. And then for the first time, I looked at my counselor. He's like, "Hey man, we can give you meds." I'm like, "Nah." And he was like, "Why?" I said, "Because I've never had to feel these things. When I did start to feel them, I ran the fuck away. So I need to face them." And was that kind of like your reaction when you jumped off your medication?
Yeah. I mean, it was scary and it was uncomfortable, but like I said, that's kind of why I found the treadmill. That's where I found movement was the most impactful for me. And it really was the catalyst for change for me, because giving those feelings somewhere to go, if you will, instead of just being in it, like just in the cesspool of all the feelings. Because especially if you've been for any reason disconnecting for any period of time, I don't care if it's a week, a year, 10 years, all that shit's going to come up. That's why we keep using or keep medicating, because we're like, we don't know how. And so I think that was the biggest struggle for some of my clients as they're starting to come into their own recovery process, because a lot of my clients aren't in recovery from drugs and alcohol, right? They're in recovery from not being able to create the life they want for whatever reason, right? The stuckness. They're in the stuckness. And I think for me, what the actual experience was 100% discomfort, right? 100% discomfort. And it was learning how to be okay in the discomfort first. Really, it was being able to like sit there in it, letting it suck and embracing the suck. And I think that the movement, especially when I got out and I got into lifting, like heavy lifting, not powerlifting, but heavy, strict lifting. Oh, what that did for me, like the release it gave me. I remember being on the leg press. It must have been, I mean, we're into my recovery, maybe a year at this point. Not expecting this at all, feeling like I was having a good day, having a great session. And all of a sudden I'm pushing 6 plates on the leg press and I'm on my 4th rep and I'm trying to get to 6. And I burst into freaking tears. Like I'm talking like sobbing. Don't care who, I'm at LA Fitness. Don't give a shit who's watching me. Like lost my mind. No clue where it came from until I started learning about body work and like how shit gets stored. And like when you actually are pushing physically pushing past a barrier that you've set for yourself, pushing past these mental limits that you've set for yourself, pushing past these physiological limits and spiritual limits that you've set on yourself, and breaking through those barriers. Like there's something that just happens. Yeah. And so I started calling it on purpose resistance, right? Like on purpose resistance. Like where in my life am I creating on purpose resistance? So that way, when I do feel like the resistance of the world and life happening, it doesn't even faze me. Like on a physiological nervous system level, it does not affect me the same anymore. When I do not challenge myself, when I'm not putting myself in a physical overload or a mental overload in some areas, guess what? I start going nuts. My depression kicks in. I start getting like super paranoid. I start not being able to focus and put energy where I really need to put my energy, because there's no such thing as creating energy or destroying energy. You can only displace it or, I'm going to say corral for lack of better words, contract it, right? Like condense. You can displace it or condense it. And so my energy would be so displaced because I wasn't giving myself the opportunity to focus it in hardcore concentrations in certain areas, if that makes sense. So I found that the heavier I lifted, the more I challenged myself, the more HIIT exercise I did, the more conversations I had that I didn't want to have, the more visible I got when I didn't want to be seen. Getting on stage, half naked, more than half naked, for other people to judge me just solely based off how I look when I was a super insecure teenager with terrible cystic acne and, and then here I am putting myself out there for everyone to just say whatever they want about, and learning how to not care about that. Talk about challenges, like on purpose resistance. They were things I did not want to do. They were things to this day, sometimes I still don't want to do, but I do them because I know it contributes to my mental wellness, to my spiritual wellness, to my emotional wellness, to my physical overall wellness, right? And it's like, those are things I don't feel like I would have ever had the opportunity to experience, or the lessons I wouldn't have been able to learn on my own. Yeah, people can tell me shit all day long. It's not how I learn. It's just not, right? And so had I still been on meds, had I not allowed myself the ability to feel the discomfort and like learn how to navigate through that and come out the other side, I don't think I absolutely am 100% positive there's no way I'd be where I am today.
Yeah, I agree. You were talking about being uncomfortable, and I hate in recovery when people say, "Oh, this sucks. I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to do this anymore." Well, sorry, homie. I didn't know that you were supposed to be fucking comfortable in recovery, right? Like, I thought this whole thing of recovery was stepping out and doing something new to change your fucking life. And I'm glad that you hit on being uncomfortable and living in that uncomfortability. It's important.
It's key. I mean, it's literally key because, and that's why, so the book coming out, it's called Resilience, a different kind of strong, because a different kind of strong is being able to be uncomfortable and be okay with it. Right? Yeah. Feel the discomfort and do it anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Right? Recovery, like again, recovery, people think about post-trauma, or like they think about, physical recovery, like in recovery centers, like with a physical therapist and things like that. Okay, let's compare it then, because it's the same shit, right? You think it's comfortable for the guy that lost the use of his legs to get up and put his whole body weight on his arms to try and learn how to navigate his legs again? Or for someone like my mom, who was in a coma for 3 weeks and in intensive care for a month and a half, after she'd been trached, trying to learn how to swallow whole foods or swallow water or talk again, or even use her hands to open a chapstick. Like that shit was uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's hard, right? But we can do hard things. We just have to believe that we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%. So, what does life look like for you now?
Gosh, it's got its ups and downs, but I'm so freaking grateful for all of it. I mean, I literally just pulled myself out of a depression I would say it's been going on, probably started creeping in 90 days ago and really sunk in about a month ago. And just a few weeks ago, I finally started to see the light. And that's real life. Right? That is real life. That is a spiritual being having a human experience and being honest with herself about it, and having grace with myself about it, and loving myself through it. And just knowing that as long as I keep my non-negotiables in place, like I'm going to be all right. So I have certain things today in my life that are set up as a non-negotiable. daily movement. I don't give a shit what's going on. I don't care what the weather's like. I don't care who died. I don't care who's dropping bombs. I am going outside and going for a walk no matter what. Sometimes that, most days that also includes the gym. Most days that also includes, like, not most weeks that includes some kind of a hike, but mandatory outside movement, minimum 15 minutes every single day in the light, even if it's cloudy, even if, like I said, if it's raining, doesn't matter. I need to be out there. I need to be barefoot every day in my yard, at least once every day. That's a huge part of my grounding. It's a huge part of my recovery is plants. And so I have hundreds of potted plants in my house and in my yard that I love on and baby every week. And it's a whole thing for me. So that's a big part of my recovery. As far as business goes, I have 2 thriving businesses. I still do hair. I got my license when I turned 18 and got sober the first time. And thankfully that has been my hustle for the last 20 years. And it is what gives me life. It's that instant gratification transformation where someone walks in, they sit in my chair and they feel like shit, and they're second guessing everything. And they, and then by the time they leave, between the coaching, the questions, the like pumping them up, you know what I mean? And the physical transformation, it's everything, right? Because they walk out feeling like they can take on the world. And I love that. As far as coaching goes, my other business, my main business now, I'm grateful to say I'm in my 4th year of having a 6-figure business, just with doing the coaching business, Lifestyle Recovery Solutions. And I have, and so that is a thriving, and that's still growing. And it's interesting because I'm so I've never really paid so much business attention to the hair. It just kind of I always had enough money and could always pay the bills. And I never really paid any attention, but to how I was marketing or anything like that, because I got everything through referral. And so it's been really interesting now in my business today in the coaching, seeing how, like, if I'm not out there and I'm not networking and I'm not making connections and I'm not building relationships, my business suffers. And so even while I'm serving my clients and serving my community that I've already built up, it is so important for me right now. And I think this is my big focus, is getting back out there, reintroducing myself to people, reminding them or letting them know who I am and what I do and how I serve clients, and really getting clear on that again myself, because the niche shifts. And so now who I really serve in my coaching business are mostly entrepreneurs, but also other busy professionals that are in the serving industry or the giving industry. So nurses, teachers, I do a lot of real estate agents actually, but other service providers who are maybe a little bit codependent like myself, who maybe thrive from being able to take care of everyone else and making sure everyone else is okay. But unfortunately, they suffer as a result of that and don't focus at all on themselves. And they tend to lose themselves in the process, which leads to burnout, resentment, broken relations with everyone in their life. And so my goal is to make sure that my clients are living like a quality, sustainable life and career, that they have a quality, sustainable life and career of serving others, because they make their own health and wellness and happiness a priority. And so learning how to, being able to help them and support them in holding space for themselves and having a little more grace for themselves, finding that they are worthy, finding that they are worth fighting for themselves, right? Like, that gives me life now. Like, that's my niche. That's where I'm at with it. And so I thoroughly enjoy that. I own my own home outright, something I never thought I would say. I have now for 4 years, almost 5 years, actually. And, and I'm serving my community, and I'm able to go speak at schools and do assemblies and speak to these kids, where I really started to disconnect at that age, where I really started to try and figure out who I was and struggled with that. And so I'm just hopeful that, I can continue to kind of go that direction. I think is kind of where I'm headed, is to get them before, because I love raising my adults and all, but like, if I can get in there before they get all fucked up, like, that would be key. You know what I mean? Like, that would be helpful. So just really kind of navigating into that direction now. I'm in a relationship. I've been with my fiance for 10 years. We're celebrating 10 years this summer. And that's my longest relationship by far, and my healthiest relationship by far. And I had to kiss quite a few frogs, and what I realized is that, once I figured out who I was, once I figured out what I wanted, what my values were, what my expectations were, like, absolutely, I have expectations. And if you can't live up to those expectations, those bare minimums, those standards, they're standards. Mm-hmm. And they're not crazy. They're not crazy. I used to think they were crazy. They're not crazy because I have a man to prove that they're not. And what's beautiful is that we continue to communicate. We continue to ask of each other, hey, I'm growing in this direction. I'm really curious about growing in this direction. Will you grow with me? Yeah. And having those hard conversations. And we just went through that recently. And it's such a beautiful thing to learn as you go through these experiences. And this is, I'm so grateful to be in this place now, because as we go through and walk through these experiences, the things that we learn about ourselves are so valuable. And what I realized going through this last, down point, low vibe situation was, I'm going to be okay no matter what. Really readdressing that. I know I've learned that before in the past, but sometimes we need to be reminded. And that, like, I love my man, but I love myself more. And as much as I want to grow with him in this life together and experience this life together, if you are not going to level up with me, I got to go on my own, and I got to let you go with love. And we got to have that hard conversation. And that's a conversation I never, as a codependent addict, technically, right? As like a people-pleasing perfectionist, like someone who just wants everyone to be okay. That was like low key. A lot of my parts were absolutely crushed when I admitted, like, I'd be okay without him. I don't want to be, but I would be. And it was also so empowering at the same time, because it was like, now I reminded myself that we are in this together. And if we're not, then that needs to be made clear. Absolutely. And that is how I get to move forward in all of my relationships, whether it be with my clients, my coworkers, my whatever it is, right? Like, these are my standards. This is what I want out of life. This is this is the example of what I want to be experiencing. Do you want to up level with me or not? And you don't have to come. I can love you over there. You're just not going to be here.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Healthy boundaries, guys.
Absolutely. You hit on being a beautician, working on hair and stuff. You can do a ton of yeah. Look at your hair. Look at my
before we met, when I text you, I was like, so I've got like a whole top bun knot situation going on. And I'm like, just curious, like, are we actually recording today? And you were like, oh yeah, just come as you are. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to freaking happen. Not for the recording. I have 7 minutes. I can go throw some curls in this shit, and I can like be, somewhat presentable. So.
Understood. You can do a ton of peer work while you're cutting hair, and that is the beautiful thing, is a lot of people don't realize, like, you can tie in peer work doing anything, right?
Yeah.
Anything at all, and that's the most beautiful thing. And then you mentioned it, the transformation of how people feel and view themselves after they're done. That's just amazing.
Oh, it's honestly, like I said, people ask me, they're like, my clients have told me, you better not stop doing hair because I'll hunt your ass down. And I'm like, okay, look, chill, first of all, right? Because come for me, I dare you. But second, right, I have to remind people, like, I just look like this, right? I know your presumption is that I'm just this, whatever you think when you look at me. But honey, I'm street, so let's chill, right? Like, because I just look like this. So, it's interesting because, like you said, I can do peer work anywhere, and it's the truth. And my clientele has, God, the quality of my clientele has evolved so much since I've started doing this work, simply because instead of, as a personal trainer, I was a consultant. I was the expert. I was the one, you were coming to me, you were saying, what do I need to do? And I said, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to eat. This is the action you need to take, period. I don't care how you feel about it. As a coach, like, I'm not the expert. You are. So my job is to help make you the expert of your own life, right? And so my job isn't to tell you, it's to ask. Yeah. And so, now that I've shifted that, and I'm behind the chair, my clients are, victim to whatever vibe I bring because they're in my chair. And so I have an opportunity there, right? And so I use that as often as I can to ask them the questions that no one is asking them, so that they can come up with their own right answers. And like the revelations that happen just in the, short amount of time, honestly, some of them are 3-4 hours long, but just in the amount of time that we're together in this tight little situation, this intimate experience we're having together, where I'm loving on them and feeding them with all of these words of encouragement or whatever, I'm also asking them to pull from what it is that they know to be true, instead of according to everyone else. Because at this, this time, they're in my chance to do, no one to please. When you're in this space, what does that actually look like? Right. And like, it's amazing. I'm just so grateful to be able to do this work. Right. Like, obviously, I was kept around for a reason. So I love it.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and in those moments where you're telling people and they have that revelation, you know, one of my things that I've always told people is that we have the answers to all of our fucking questions, every single one of them. We just haven't taken the time to run around the bush, beat around bullshit to get to that answer. And you know, you're doing a great job at that. So that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So before we get going, what is one or two pieces of advice that you would give somebody that's struggling, that's new to recovery, you know, that's kind of out of their element right now?
Trust yourself more. Trust yourself more. You know, like you just said it, you know the answer. You doubt it, you question it, you beat around the bush, you try to find all these reasons and you know, rationalizations around why that's not the truth. But the truth is, you know, you're an asshole. Stop being an asshole, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
you're an asshole. Stop being an asshole. Stop blaming everybody else. Stop giving anybody else accountability for what you're experiencing in this life. You are the only one who gets to decide what your experience is in this life. The only one. I don't care what the circumstances are. I don't care who said you can't. I don't care if you're in prison. I don't care if you're living on the streets. I don't care if you have, you know, criminal history and so you say you can't get a job. Then start a business. Okay, then start a business. Don't know how? Google it, right? There, the answer is in the room, always. And you just have to ask the right questions. So decide. My question would be for you, what do you want to be experiencing? I don't give a shit what you want materialistically. I don't care how long you want to be in what kind of guy you want, what kind of girl you want, what kind of house you want, what kind of car you want. I don't give two shits about that. That's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is, what is the experience that car is going to give you? What is the experience that girl or that guy is going to give you? What is the result of having that? What is the experience that you want to be having in this moment right now? And like the first way to get clear on that, first step of the framework, connection. What is going well? What is not going well? Make a list side by side. What's going well? What's not? In the beginning of your recovery, this side is going to be way longer. May need a couple pages. That's fine. No big deal. We're just getting it out on paper. Second step, decide what you want instead. If you don't want to be experiencing disconnection, then where can we start to experience connection? If you don't want to be filled with self-doubt and self-hatred, you want to be experiencing self-love and self-trust, right? You want to be digging into you want to be able to trust your intuition. If you don't want to be experiencing unhealthy relationships, then you get to set boundaries around what it looks like to have a healthy relationship. What does a healthy relationship look like? Get specific, right? Get specific and create a vision of what you actually want, and then work backwards, right? Because you have the where you're at. It's just like Google Maps. You need the current location, the exact coordinates, and you need a destination, the exact coordinates. Otherwise, you are not going to get a step-by-step blueprint of where it is, of the exact steps that you need to take to get where you want to go. Google Map it.
Absolutely. That was awesome. That was awesome. So, Jen, where can we find you at? No physical location, all right? Just where can we find you on social media?
I actually have an office, so I do have a physical location. You can find me, but by appointment only.
Okay.
But so I do have an office here in Riverside, California. So I do in-person sessions. I do in-person group sessions, and I'm going to be opening up a lifestyle recovery meeting in person closer to when the book comes out. I am on Facebook under Jennifer Henry. Instagram, Fit Mind Body and Spirit. So it's Fit Mind Body, the letter N, Spirit. And I also have a business account for IG, which is Lifestyle Recovery Solutions, _ between the words. Let's see. LifestyleRecoverySolutions.com is where I keep all my up-to-date masterclasses, all of my bio, that kind of stuff, any blogs I've written. And I have a new virtual assistant who's going to be updating that with all the podcasts I've been on, because I have to go hunt them all down because I was not organizing them. So there's tons of information out there around what I do. But really, I think honestly, I'm mostly on Facebook. I feel like I'm aging myself by saying that, but I'm mostly on Facebook. But jump in my DMs on Instagram or Facebook anytime. They're always open. I love to support anyone who really feels like they need, a little clarity around how to figure out how to experience what they want in this life, So if you're struggling, reach out. I'd be more than happy to hop on a call with you and just kind of ask you some questions to help you figure out your own right answers.
Sweet. All right, Jen, I want to thank you for taking this hour to hang out with me and talk to me and just share your experience, strength, and hope. That's pretty awesome. You know,
I appreciate the time.
yeah, you've been an awesome guest and very motivating, very inspirational. So
I appreciate you. Thank you.
thank you. And everybody, thanks for hanging out with us for this hour. Thank you for allowing Jen to creep into your ear and me to creep into your ear and talk to you about some things. And until next time, I hope you guys have a good day. Much love.